Hi, welcome back to our channel, and in this video I'm going to teach you how to add lighting to your animations in After Effects. So we're gonna go from this to this. But before we jump into After Effects, let's first learn basic lighting principles. The how part is usually easy. So the how part, the actually doing the stuff in After Effects is easy. You can just follow this tutorial step by step. Then boom, you have a nice lighting in After Effects. But what you really want to learn is the why part. You want to know why we are moving this or why we are adding that. And we are able to achieve that understanding if we learn the basic principles in lighting. So let's get to it. So I usually use a free lighting setup. So this is a technique in cinematography, like the ones you usually see in films. For example, you have this ball as a subject. And let's consider this as the top view. You're looking at it from above. The first light is called the key light. This is our primary light source. This is usually the brightest. The second light is called fill light. So when you have a key light, your subject would have shadows on the part that the key light couldn't hit. So the fill light is placed in a way where the shadows would be. The purpose of the fill light is to control the intensity of the shadows. Having no fill light would produce the darkest shadows, and having a bright fill light would somehow eliminate the shadows. You could also use colored lights, and that would change the color of the shadows. So one thing to note though is that darkness isn't necessarily a bad thing. In fact, darkness emphasizes light. So I have committed this mistake early on in my career where I hesitate using dark shadows, or I hesitate adding shadows to my scene because I feel like it would make the scene look dark or the scene look evening when I want it to be afternoon or morning. But if you are going to observe your room, you will quickly realize, no matter what time of day it is, that the room is in fact in shadow, or majority is in shadow. If it's in the morning, majority of the room is still in shadow, but the intensity of the shadows is low. It's because your primary light source is too bright, so the shadows aren't that dark. But try to observe it. Okay, in the morning, observe your room and you'll quickly notice that majority of your room is in shadow. Moving on to the third light, this is called the backlight or rim light. This is usually placed at the back. Now let's look at this at a different angle. So let's say this is the floor. The local color, that's another term you should know. The local color is the color of the subject. In this case, it's red. But if we turn off the lights, the color would be, at least for us the viewers, it would be dark red. Let's add the key light here. It's lighting this part of the ball, and this side would be in shadow. Because the light is here, let's add a cast shadow. Now let's add a fill light here. So in an illustration perspective, the fill light isn't drawn. The presence of the fill light is when we maybe adjust the color of the shadow or lessen the opacity. Lastly, let's add a backlight. Usually you add a backlight to add depth. Right now, the background is dark and there's little contrast in the shadow part and the background. So if we add a light on the back, then this part would capture some light. And let's say the color of the light that we used would be blue or cyan. And that's the basics in lighting. Now let's get into After Effects. So these are the assets that I'm going to use in this video. So we have a background. So this is the background. We need also the chair, and we have a standing up animation. So I'm just going to drag the background and the stand-up animation to our project, and I'm just gonna drag this to my After Effects project. And then let's import this chair. The reason why I didn't include this because I need this to be in layers. This one has layers inside. So that's why I didn't include it in the group. So now I'm just gonna drag this here and we'll have this pop up. And I want this to be editable layer styles. Make sure the import kind is composition retain layer sizes, then click OK. And we have now this comp. And to start, I'm just gonna create a new comp, and then the resolution would be a square resolution. It's 1080 by 1080. And then I'm just gonna drag this animation.mov here, and I'm just gonna show you what I have done. So I'm gonna press S on my keyboard and scale this down a bit to around something like this. And then the animation is only up to this point, so I'm gonna bring the work area to only around here. So I'm gonna press N on my keyboard, and then I'm gonna click spacebar to preview this. So this is the animation. So if you want access to the project files, this is available to our Patreon supporters. So I will leave the link in the description below. So if you want to follow along with me with the exact files, you could check out the link. And also in our Patreon page, we have project files. I did the animation here in Photoshop, but I just pre-rendered this so that when we are going to preview this back and forth, it's really quick. But the PSD, the Photoshop animation of this is included in the Patreon website. I will leave that I would leave the link in the description below. But if you don't want to use that, or if you don't want to go into Patreon and get the files, you could also do so. But you have to create your own animation and your own background, and then you could follow along with me. So let's get back to the video. So this one is done in Photoshop, and this one is a MOV. This is pre-rendered so that whenever I click spacebar, it's very quick. But you could think of this MOV, this video file, as an animation. This could be a different comp, right? You could create a new comp and you have an animation and you bring that in. Okay, so I'm just using this just for demonstration purposes. Okay, so we have now our initial animation, or this is the animation, this initial pose. And then I'm going to go inside our chair, and we have 3 layers. And I'll show you why we need those 3 layers. So I'm just gonna select all of them, and I'm going to copy this, and then go back to our comp right here, and then paste it here. And I'm gonna create a null for this one, so that I could control all of these layers with just one null. So I'm just gonna select all of them and parent it to the null. So it's controlled by this. Okay, and I think I'm going to scale this down. So I'm just gonna zoom in, scale this, and match this to the sitting position. So I think around something like this. Okay, so what we need is what is this part 1? So I'm just gonna hide and reveal. Okay, this one's gonna be on top. So we need this chair part 2 to be below the stand-up animation layer, so that it's gonna be like that. And we also need this chair part 3, which is this one, to be below chair part 2. So it's going to be like that. And that's the reason why I want this layered. And currently, I think we can move the chair a bit back. So this one, I'm just gonna bring this a bit back. So I still want that depth. You'll see here that her foot is over the this part of the chair, and I like that because it's giving depth to the whole scene. Even just a subtle there's a bit of overlap, and that gives depth. And let's just preview this. Okay, now that's good. Now let's bring in our background. This is our background, so I'm just gonna drag this here, and we have our background. And then I'm going to scale this up, and I'm going to match the perspective of the chair. So I think around like this would be good. And I've intentionally made the background, so the background and the character is designed by a different person, but I have edited it and made it transparent so that we could customize the color. So we need a solid on the bottom, so I'm just going to create a new solid, and I'm going to make the color of this to be something like this, cyan color and a bit dark. The brightness is, I think, somewhere around here. Click OK and OK, and we need to bring this to the bottom of the BG layer. So now it's going to be like that. So the first thing that I do is we need to recall our basic lighting principles. We need to have a key light, a fill light, and a backlight. Okay, so the first thing that I really do when I'm lighting a scene is I make everything go dark. Like everything is a dark room, and slowly I add in the light. I add in the key light, fill light, and then the backlight. So the equivalent of that in After Effects is, first I'm gonna make the background dark. So I'm gonna create a different solid, or you could also use a shape for that. I think I'll use shape because it's easier to control. So it's going to be like this, right? And I'm just gonna bring this to just above the background. Okay, so just above the background. So currently I can't see the background. We need to change the blending mode. So if in case you don't see this mode right here, it's probably you need to click this toggle switches / modes button, right? So click that and this mode will be revealed. And now for this shape, I'm just gonna change this to multiply, and this would be the effect. Now if you don't want it to be too dark, you could always just adjust the opacity. So the shortcut to just show the opacity is T on your keyboard, and we could adjust the opacity of this. So I think I'm going with this. We could always just adjust the darkness of the shadow, either that, or you could adjust the color, right? Different color would produce a different effect. So I'm using this one. And then let's decide where the light is coming from. So I decide that the light is coming from here, this side. So I'm gonna create a new shape, a different shape. It's gonna be something like this. So this one is a different shape layer now, and I'm just gonna place this just above this multiply layer. And then what I'm gonna do here is under the TRK matte here, I'm going to select alpha matte inverted. So you could think of it like the second layer is punching a hole on the layer below it. So now we have a light here, and if you still don't understand the alpha mattes inverted, I would explain that later on. Now for the character, so let's start with this. What I'm going to do is we're gonna add shadows to this. Okay, so I'm gonna duplicate this. So I would duplicate that. So we have now 2 copies of that animation. Again, you could think of this like it's a comp, right? I'm just using a video, a footage, but this could be a different comp with your own animation. Okay, so now I'm gonna add a fill effect to this. So I'm just gonna go here and type fill and add a fill effect. So now it's red, but we could change this. Maybe I'm gonna use the cyan color or a bit blue, I guess. I'm just gonna click OK, and then I'm gonna set the mode to multiply. So it's gonna be like that. Now it's like in shadow, but it's currently too bright. So I'm just gonna adjust the fill color and maybe make it a bit darker. I'm just gonna adjust it to around something like this. So now we're currently, this one is, we have this one, right? And now our subject is in shadow. So now we are going to add the key light. So the key light is on this side, right? The primary light source is coming from here, this side. So we need to have the character, this one, to light up here. So our shadow is consuming all of the illustration. But what we could also do is we could punch a hole on this side here so that the shadow is only on this part. So we could do that by duplicating the stand-up animation. So the shortcut for duplicate is Command D if you're working in a Mac. That's Control D if you're working on a Windows. Okay. Now, what we want to do is, this is now our shadow. So I'm just gonna rename this so that we're not, it's not too confusing. I'm just gonna rename this to animation-shadow. And this one, I'm going to rename this to our main animation. And this third one is, I'm just going to rename this to mask. Okay, so I just renamed the layer name, but all of this are the same thing. Okay, we have 3 duplicates of the same thing. Now for the, I'm just gonna remove the blending mode for it because this is not, it's not important to have a blending mode. So for the animation shadow, I'm going to select alpha matte. Okay, so it's going to be like that. And then for the mask, I'm just going to adjust this. And then we have our key light. So now let me explain the alpha mattes and alpha mattes inverted. So I'm going to open Adobe Illustrator so that I could explain this properly. For this example, I'm just gonna use a circle. Okay, so and I'm just gonna change this to red. So we have, and let's consider this as our main animation, okay? And what we did, right, is we duplicated this. So I'm gonna create a new layer. So now I have 2 layers, and now I'm gonna copy this and then paste it. So now I have 2 copies of that circle. So I'm just gonna change the color of this to maybe darker red so that we could differentiate the 2. Okay, so we have that. And then I'm going to duplicate this again. So I'm gonna copy, create a new layer, and then paste it. So now we have 3 copies of the same thing, okay? And for this third copy, I'm just gonna change this to black. So we could differentiate those 3 circles. This one is our main, this one would be our shadow, and the black one would be our mask. And I'm just going to hide the main illustration, this layer 1. I'm gonna hide that. So what we have here now are 2 circles. So what we did is we moved the mask a bit, right? So we moved it to like that. Now think about it, that this mask is punching a hole on the second circle, this one. So in Illustrator, to do that, you just select this, and using the Pathfinder, you'll have that one. So now you have this, okay? And there's another like way. So this, the equivalent of this in After Effects is the alpha mattes, okay? So if I'm gonna select this and do this one is the alpha matte. I could also select this and only show where they are intersecting, like that. This is the alpha mattes inverted. The equivalent of this in Adobe After Effects is alpha mattes inverted. So let's go back to After Effects. So you see here, I'm just gonna, currently it's alpha mattes, but if I'm gonna choose alpha mattes inverted, it's gonna invert it. See, the shadow would be on this part, and this one would be, it's like it's empty. Okay, so I'm just gonna click this solo mode so that you'll see, right? So currently this is the only what is shown in this layer, but if we choose alpha matte, it's gonna be like that. This one would be alpha mats inverted. And let me unselect this, so we have this. Now for the fill light. So currently, this one already has the fill light. Again, in an illustration perspective, the fill light isn't that noticeable. Okay, it's not like we're adding something. We are just adjusting the shadows. So for the fill light of this one is our shadow, right? So I'm gonna press T on my keyboard, and then I'm gonna adjust this. In After Effects, you are adjusting the opacity, but in the real world, we are adjusting the fill light, right? So we could change the color of this if you want it to be like warmer. It's gonna be like that. But I think I'm good with this bluish shadow, and maybe I'm just gonna make this a bit darker. So here we are adjusting the fill light. Now, how about the backlight? We want to have a backlight, right? The purpose of the backlight is to separate our subject from the background, right? So we are going to use use the same technique. We are going to duplicate the main animation, and I'm just gonna rename this as backlight. And I'm gonna duplicate this again and rename this to mask. So this is gonna be the mask of my backlight. And now I'm gonna use alpha mats inverted. And before anything else, I'm gonna add a fill effect, right? So I need to change the color, so I'm just gonna leave that red for now. And so that I could see the effect of this, I'm gonna move the mask around, right? So this is now going to be our backlight. So you could think of this, maybe there's a window here, and probably there's like a moonlight casting, or this part here is receiving like the moonlight. That's why we have this, the moonlight now act as our backlight. And I'm just gonna change the color of this to maybe around something like this. And then you could play around with the blending mode. You could try overlay, so it's gonna look like that. But I think I would want color dodge for this. So it's gonna be like that. And then let's reduce the intensity. So in the real world, if you have a light source here, right, or that studio lights, we are going to dim that. So the equivalent of that in After Effects is we are going to reduce the opacity to something around like that. And now let's preview this. And because we have duplicated the footage, so our backlight and shadow, they move along with our footage. So I'm gonna preview this. So it's gonna look like that. So our chair doesn't have any lighting and it feels out of place. So we need to add lighting. The things that we have added on the character, we need to add to the chair, to each part of the chair right here. We have 3 parts. Okay, so let's start with this. So I'm gonna duplicate this twice, and I'm gonna rename this as we would need that part 1 because there is part 2 and part 3. We're gonna do the same for those two. So I'm just gonna leave that in the layer name. So chair part 1 dash shadow, and this one would be chair, or I'm just gonna name all mask as mask. And then this one, let's add a fill effect and change this to alpha matte. So it's now something like that. And then I'm just going to change this to maybe dark blue, and then change the blending mode to multiply. And I'm gonna adjust the opacity of this. And now for the mask, let's adjust the mask. Okay, so the light source is on this side. So I'm going to select the mask, and it's gonna be something like this. And I don't think you could add the backlight for the chair too if you want, but I don't think it's necessary. So for the chair part 2 right here, what is this? Okay, it's this main chair. So I'm going to again duplicate this twice, and this one I'm gonna rename this to chair part 2 dash shadow, and this one is the mask. And then I'm going to for the track matte, click the alpha matte, and then add a fill, the fill effect, so that we could change the color, change this to dark blue, and then change the blending mode to multiply. And then let's change the intensity of this, something about like that. And then I'm gonna adjust the mask, right? So we need to have this part to be in light. So we are going to adjust the mask, something like that. Now for the back part of the chair, it's gonna be chair part 3. Again, I'm gonna duplicate this twice. This one, I'm gonna rename this chair part 3 dash shadow, and then the third duplicate, I'm gonna rename this to mask. I'm lacking O here for the name. And then for the TRK matte, let's change this to alpha matte, and then I'm gonna add fill to this. It's gonna be like that, and change this again to dark blue. So if you're confused whether to use alpha mattes or alpha mattes inverted, just try it out. Just try out what it looks like with alpha matte and alpha matte inverted. I'm also confused sometimes which is which, and I just switch between these two to see if that's the one I had in mind. So I'm gonna move this, and let's change this to multiply. One thing to note though is that only move the mask, not the main, not the shadow. You don't move the shadow, you just move the mask. So I think this is already good. Now let's add cast shadow to this, because currently these things aren't, the character and the chair aren't casting a shadow, and it feels weird without them. So I'm just gonna use a rectangle for the cast shadow, and I'm just gonna make the shadow black. So it's gonna be like this maybe, and then bring this. So I'm just gonna rename this to cast shadow, and then bring this to the bottom, but above the background. So something like that. And then I'm going to select, where is that cast shadow? Here. And then let's preview this. Now, if you want to add glow to this, you can. You could just add an adjustment layer, and then type in the effects and presets panel, type in glow, and then apply that to the adjustment layer. So how adjustment layer works is everything below the adjustment layer would have the glow effect. Okay, so this glow is being applied to all of the layers below the adjustment layer. So I'm just gonna increase the radius, the glow radius of this, and play around with the numbers here for the glow threshold. I actually also don't really know for sure what they do, but I just try out the different values and see the effect here, and choose the one that you want. You could also change the glow intensity if the glow is just too bright. So I'm gonna bring this to 0.5. right? So this is without glow and with glow. So I just want the glow to be subtle. And if you want the background to be darker, you could either change the background color or set the opacity of this, right? Remember, we added one big square as to make the background darker. So I could just adjust this, making it darker, something like that. And we have our lighting. So how about if you want this to be morning, right? This would seem like it's evening. And what if you want this to be like it was being shot in the morning or in the afternoon? Um, you just need to change the colors. Okay, so I'm going to go back to my project tab, and I'm gonna duplicate this comp. So I'm gonna duplicate that. So everything we did on comp 1 would now be on comp 2. So I'm gonna enter comp 2 now. So I'm gonna double click this. I'm now on comp 2. And we are just going to adjust the color. Okay, so I'm just going to adjust the color of our background here. So I'm gonna click Command Shift Y because I'm working on a Mac, but if you're working on a Windows computer, that would be Control Shift Y. And then let's change the color of the solid. Maybe around something like yellow or dark yellow, or maybe something like orange, dark orange. It's gonna look like that. And because this is like morning or probably afternoon, I'm going to lessen the multiply. But again, still this one still has shadow, right? The overall the room is still in shadow overall. Now for the animation shadow, this one, remember this is an effect. We have a fill effect and it's blue. I'm going to change this to maybe dark yellow, something like that. And for the backlight, instead of the cyan color, I'm gonna make it yellow. And let's change the opacity. Let's change the intensity of this, something like that. But we also have like our primary light source is like here. So maybe I don't know what time of day this is, but maybe there's a window here. That's why we have this like the backlight. But our primary light source would still be here on the front. So what I want to do is I want to increase the intensity of the light here. How can I do that? Remember, this is the shadow, right? This one, so I'm just gonna click the solo mode. Remember, this is the shadow. And this one is this color. It's because the shadow is empty and now we are seeing the local color of the animation, right? This is now the local color. Now, what if I want to add like add an maybe a color dodge, or we could add the color dodge here, like something like more yellow color for this. What I could do is I could select the mask and the animation shadow, duplicate that, and now we have this shadow. But I'm just gonna click solo mode. But instead of alpha mattes, let's choose alpha mattes inverted. So now that I'm going to unselect the solo mode, so now it's gonna look like that. But instead of multiply, let's choose color dodge. So now we have this one, right? And for the color, if I'm gonna make it brighter, so it's also gonna make this one brighter here. And I'm just gonna, or we could adjust the opacity of this. So what I want is, I don't want the backlight to overpower our key light. So this one now, I'm just gonna rename this. I'm just gonna rename this as key light. For our backlight, this one, I'm just gonna reduce the opacity. Because I want to have like light here, but I don't want it to overpower our main light source here. And there we have it. Also for the animation shadow, I think I would want this to be darker. Just wanna give it a try, what it looks like to be dark. Again, here, as you can see here, even if I make the shadows darker, it's not making the whole scene like it was being shot in the nighttime, right? So don't be afraid to add shadows to your animations. And if anything, it's this color that's making the whole scene dark. So I could just lessen this, or we could adjust the background color, right? This background color. I'm just gonna click again, Command Shift Y, and then make this a bit brighter. So I'm just gonna make this brighter, and now it looks like that. So even with the darker shadows, it still looks like it's afternoon. And let's preview this. So there's also one thing we forgot to adjust, and that's the chair. The shadow color for the chair is still blue, while the shadow color for the character is now, I think, like dark yellow, I think, or dark orange. So we have the environment here in like orange, so the shadow should also be in that color. So let's adjust the shadow color for the chair. Instead of blue, I'm just gonna bring it to something like that, and adjust the shadow color of the other parts of the chair. So this one, make it warmer, and also the last part here, make this one warmer. And there you have it. This is now our lighting. So that's how I add lighting to my animations in After Effects. So just to recap, I usually use a 3 lighting setup, which is I have a key light, a fill light, and a backlight. And what I want you to take away from this is that you need to continue to educate yourself with regards to lighting. So you already know the basics, but now that you know the basics, you could now see lighting or like the environment differently. So whether you're in a room or in a coffee shop, try to observe the surrounding, what time of day it is, and try to observe where the shadows are depending on the time of day and what the color of the shadows are. So how I approach lighting in After Effects or when trying to light my scene is I usually like analyze first where is the primary source of light? Is there a secondary source of light? So for example, we have an object here and this is the primary light source. How does that object react to that light? How does that object capture that light? And what if we have a secondary light here? What would be the effect? What would that look like? And having that question all the time, you experiment, right? If you are in a place where with good lighting, maybe put in a ball there and just try to observe lighting. And with this new knowledge that you will gain, now you'd be able to apply that in After Effects. Now you could use the alpha mats or the alpha mats inverted technique or method to achieve any light setup that you want. So that's it. Thank you very much for watching. Again, if you want to get access files, if you want to access the project files of this, it's available on Patreon. I will leave the link in the description below. And also, if you support us on Patreon, you also get the project files of about 30 other projects that we have done in the past. And if you like this video, please give us a thumbs up. It really helps us a lot. And please subscribe if you want to see more content like this. That's it. Thank you very much for watching and thank you for your time. I hope to see you on the next video.